Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome one, welcome all, and we're here for the informal session. And Mr. Duhaney, I think you got a lively agenda for the council manager's briefings.
All right. Mr. Mayor, members of council, at this time, Deputy City Manager Ron Williams will provide the council with a brief presentation on the Dome site Atlantic Park project. In particular, we're going to talk about the additional resources needed for the music venue to be considered today in the council meeting.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council. Your item this evening, item number 9B under ordinances, is a recommendation for approval to transfer monies from the Dome site parking CIP and resort parking district CIP to accommodate the estimated budget at 40% of the entertainment venue as part of the Dome site under its revised scope. I guess, Mr. Mayor, I guess we don't have slides here, so I'll just walk through it. As we've been discussing over the past couple years, the entertainment venue was originally styled as a 50,000 square foot facility, and we had an approved CIP at, this is not working. We had an approved CIP at 30 million. The entertainment venue was key to the RFQ that when we originally put out for proposals to come in for the Dome site redevelopment. And as we have discussed recently, last year we made the determination, and in concert with our developer, Venture Realty, and our operator, Oakview Group with Live Nation, made the determination to locate the venue on the northwest block, and that it would not be a freestanding facility, but integrated in the mixed-use development of that block. We don't have the renderings up here, sir, but I'll keep going. We also made a determination after benchmarking several of the key new facilities in the United States to make sure that this was in keeping with a world-class facility, that the venue should be have balconies and mezzanines for the ticket holders' experience, and that it was going to incorporate an outdoor flexible space that could increase the total number of attendees for the events there. We do have, again, the massing with the northwest block there and its location in the event lawn, Mayor, members of council. And here you see the convertible aspect of the venue as proposed, with the accordion door that can open out to the event lawn, with the mezzanine and balcony levels that also has some fixed seating. Again, the venue itself accommodating 3,500 patrons, and then the event lawn with an expansion of over 2,000. This is our current rendering of what it looks like with that experience at a nighttime event, where the event lawn is engaged with the indoor stage area and the ability to project onto the exterior of the facility. A couple of key drivers in the cost here, Mayor. One is that the cost of construction has gone up over the past 5 years, 17% estimated nationwide. On our own city projects, over the past 5 years, it's been a 15.5% escalation, mostly driven by the commodities of steel and concrete. As we have built into our development agreement, it was always contemplated that $5 million of this would be brought to the agreement by the operator, and then we would have the remaining. Again, the loading area, which was at freestanding and on the back side of the venue when we had it on the south block, now we have an increased cost to accommodate that inside of the parking venue, and then there is the event lawn that's an additional cost. For comparisons, the Anthem and the Coca-Cola Roxy in Atlanta were two venues that we and the liaisons visited and benchmarked, the Anthem being a larger venue, the Coca-Cola Roxy being pretty much right at the size venue we want, but the Roxy does not have that expansion convertible ability like we have, like we're proposing here. And so, Mayor, we do recommend that these transfers for the revision and scope be accommodated. And what that would enable us to do is to continue on with our design work to be completed this year, so we can try to start construction by the end of the year, so that we could then have an opening of the venue in the summer of 2023. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions. I do have Mike Culpepper with Venture Realty and Doug Higgins, again, with Oakview here that can answer any technical questions.
Mr. Moss.
Well, I have a statement to make, and then I have a couple questions to ask. I have previously not been able to participate in this poor use of the city's debt limit, but nonetheless, the Dominion Resources piece has been removed from active consideration as that has been completed, and I had reduced my Exxon holdings such that I no longer have a conflict of interest, so I'm able to fully participate in today's proceedings. When this first came to my attention on Friday in our packet, the first person I contacted was the city attorney, knowing that this was discussed 3 weeks ago, this Tuesday. And I asked him for a redacted copy of the brief that was given. Redacted meaning it's what the public could have seen had this body decided to disclose it to the public 3 weeks ago. It's quite extensive. It's a lot of information that should have been provided, Mr. Mayor and my colleagues, to the public way in advance of today's vote. I'll be making that redacted brief public so the people can compare it and ask why on Tuesday of last week, when we were briefed on the Dome site, this was not mentioned at all, at all. I don't know what 3 more days of secrecy bought us, but if it was public information and available under Freedom of Information Act, if you knew it existed 3 weeks ago Tuesday, it should have been fully disclosed during our retreat. Now today I have heard from a number of residents more concerned not so much about the price, but changes in the location and the orientation and additioning to outdoor stuff which propagates sounds and impacts on their neighborhood, and they feel like we're approving a concept by funding the project, and they've had no participation and no transparency until Friday of last week. And if every citizen spends all their time on the weekends doing homework, when they should be enjoying their families, maybe they'll be here tonight, but that's generally not the process that we follow. Generally, we try to have meaningful public participation, meaningful transparency. And on this particular instance, being scheduled for a vote tonight, we've had neither, and the public have not been served well. But that, my statement aside, I expressed to you in writing and emails, Mr. Mayor, and my colleagues, what my position on this issue is, and we'll be pulling that from the agenda item, having that discussion then. But my specific question is the $9 million programmed but appropriated cash, or is it appropriated debt ceiling that's being reallocated to this project?
It's contemplated, as you know, we do a reimbursement when we do projects, and so the debt service would be issued at the time of the completion of the project.
So we are allocating the debt now assigned and allocated to those 2 parking garages are now allocated to this project.
A portion of
$9.5 million worth of
Yes,
debt.
yes.
The reason why I'm asking, so now when we go into the future in this project, the parking garages, which are only being delayed and they're going to be filled up from something else, will those future garages be paid for with cash? Or are we now going to have to allocate additional $9.5 million of available credit, which we got a briefing last week, wasn't very much, and we're going to have to allocate additional available debt capacity that can't go to flooding to pay for these garages?
The a portion of it from the Dome site parking is a modification in the scope that we had additional spaces that are not needed to support the current square footages that are proposed for the development, so that would not be future. If we replenish the 4.3 in the Central Beach Parking, then yes, that would be an additional supported by the TIP fund. Yes, sir.
Supported by the TIP fund, that's not the question I asked. I asked the debt, how the debt's paid is one question. I'm asking, are we paying for it with cash, meaning there's no borrowing, or is the plan, Mr. City Manager, is the plan to issue debt to cover that construction cost of those garages in the future?
Nearly half of it, yes, as all the facilities in it would be supported by debt service. And there's a net zero change in the total amount of additional debt service. If we replenish the Central Beach parking in the future, that would be a net increase of debt service, yes, sir.
So to my real, and we haven't really gotten to, we got the parking requirement, right? Because this venue doesn't even provide the details to have that discussion. And I'm not certain the requirement went away. And maybe in executive session, there was a really good empirical analysis of that, and it didn't show through in the brief that they were not wishing away parking. But we are saying now, we are now putting an additional lien in the time frame that we're asking people to borrow additional money and pay higher taxes for flood mitigation. We're going to take additional debt capacity, and we're going to have to know that we're now going to have to use that to cover the dome site. I just want to make sure that was clear.
It is
Thank you very
not
much.
for the support of the dome site parking, no, sir. And that would be a future action that to replenish the Central Beach would be a future action.
Forget the topic of what it's for. It's still more money in a constrained environment for debt capacity to build parking at the resort that absent this reprogramming, we would not be paying for. I got the picture. I think the public understands. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else at this point? Mr. Tower.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ron, I think it might be helpful in view of Councilman's remarks to just talk a little bit more about the parking. I know residents are interested in this, both long-term and short-term. There are three areas of parking, if you could just comment on each of them briefly. One is parking during construction. The other is employee parking. That is employee of the various enterprises in the Atlantic Park area. And third is the overall parking capacity in the Central Beach and including this facility. Could you just enlighten us a little more on those?
Yes, sir.
Where we are with those?
In reverse order. So the total number of spaces that's currently contemplated by the site plan that's being reviewed in the planning department is at 1,650. Previously, we're contemplating 1,930 spaces. The form of the development has changed since we are not using the Methodist Church lot. It also will be phased, but there are square footages that have changed, most notably where we're not going to have a movie theater, for example, and the office spaces are still flexible about how many total square feet they're going to have for office. So the reduction has been right-sized for the current form of development on site. The parking plan that the developer, as the operator of the overall development, is working through is looking at a combination of both the on-site spaces and the allocation of those spaces, whether they're residential, retail, office, or employees, and then how other facilities might come into play with that, including potentially some sort of transit system. The Resort Beach CIP, there is no imminent project for the use of that. We established that, and thankfully you did appropriate it over the course of a couple of budget cycles, so that if and when redevelopment opportunities come, and in particular we're seeing it happen in Central Beach, we had the opportunity to cost share, to provide public sharing, public parking at a 1 to 200 space allocation realistically, based on what we see the market opportunity or even the form of development that would follow. And so that is how we'll grow public parking, is through the use of that. And then we also this year operationally are starting to, we are going to accommodate current, the plan is to accommodate current RPP employee parking that are used in the neighborhoods. We have additional capacity in our garages, and so we were looking to accommodate them to allow an RPP ticket holder to actually come into the garage versus into the neighborhoods. Lastly, the Resort Area Mobility Plan incorporates all of these uses, all of these activities, and that is a key piece for us to have recommendations for future operations and improvements in order to accommodate this mix of uses and parkers.
Okay, if I can say, at this point, we're trying to stick to a time schedule. I'm sure we're going to be discussing this later. So with the council's permission, you know, we all agreed that we're going to try to stay on somewhat of a timeline. But Ron, you know, sure we'll be hearing from you. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mr. Dehaney.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, at this time, Mark Reed from the Planning Department will come and brief the council in regards to the Confederate Monument RFP process. With this briefing, staff is looking for council direction with respect to where to locate the monument.
I would just say that I hope this time constraint doesn't keep us from discussing what we need to discuss.
Not at all, Ms. Henley, but the fact that this item was on the agenda, we will certainly be discussing that thoroughly.
Good afternoon, Mayor Dyer, ladies and gentlemen of City Council. I'm here to provide you an update on disposition of the Confederate Monument. 2 proposals were received for relocating the monument. The evaluation committee did not reach consensus on selecting either of the proposals, so staff is looking for direction on relocation. Some background, the City Council held a public hearing on July 23rd regarding the disposition of the Confederate Monument, and at that time directed the city manager to remove the monument and store it and to put out a request for proposals for the relocation. The monument was documented and then removed 2 days later, July 25th, and it's been placed in storage since then. The state code required that if the locality wanted to remove the monument, then they needed to offer it to museums, historical societies, governments, and military battlefields. So we did that via RFP. The RFP was issued on July 28th. It closed on September 1st, and we received 2 proposals. One proposal was from a local group, 2 organizations, the Princess Anne United Daughters of the Confederacy, Chapter 435, and the Princess Anne Sons of Confederate Veterans, Camp 484. The other proposal was from the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation. The evaluation committee didn't feel that either proposal was particularly responsive to the RFP, so we submitted a set of questions to them and received their responses, and at that time did not reach a consensus on recommending one proposal over the other. So I'm going to go briefly through the proposals for you. The United Daughters of the Confederacy and the Sons of Confederate Veterans. So these are private nonprofit heritage organizations that are chapters of national organizations that formed about 120 years ago. These chapters here locally were involved in raising funds and sponsoring the dedication of the monument. To them, the monument is a memorial to their ancestors, both the veterans that returned from the Civil War, as well as those who died during the conflict. A private property owner in Southern Virginia Beach has offered to donate a perpetual easement and egress for parking to these 2 organizations on a 1/2 acre site for placement of the monument. Their proposal is to display the monument in the same manner as it was for 115 years by the Princess Anne Courthouse. The rest of their proposal is to have the city provide them with all the necessary services to make that happen and to maintain it. So the legal services to do a survey and to do the easement documentation, and then the site preparation to clear it, install the driveway and the parking area, to pour a concrete pad and install the monument there, and then a locking gate, a 10-foot high wrought iron fence around the monument, install security cameras connected to the internet to view the monument, and then for the city to maintain the monument in perpetuity, to maintain the driveway and parking area, and also to provide insurance for the monument. So the pros that we saw for this is that the organizations have a direct connection to the monument, having been involved in its dedication some 115 years ago. The monument will remain in Virginia Beach. The negatives to it, we felt the city has to foot the bill for everything, including site preparation and relocation, plus ongoing responsibilities to maintain it in perpetuity, maintain the parking area, and provide insurance. And then their plan for public access is simply a camera connected to the internet. The other proposal was from the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation. This is a National Historic District that was established by Congress in 1996. It's a public-private partnership, essentially a federal entity that is managed by a private nonprofit organization. The Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation interprets and provides visitor services at 20 Civil War battlefields, hundreds of related historic sites in 8 counties in Shenandoah Valley. Their proposal was to relocate the Princess Anne County Confederate Monument in one of their battlefield parks. They did not specify which one. They said what they wanted to do was to rededicate it as the Virginia Monument. They would provide bronze tablets that would explain that rededication. The original prescriptions on the monument would be preserved, and an interpretive sign would be erected near the monument to document its original history as the Princess Anne County Confederate Monument. For what they request from the city, donation of the monument, one-time payment of $2,500 from the city for their perpetual care fund, and then for the actual moving of it, the foundation will provide trucks and personnel, road permits. They want the city to hire the rigging contractors to load the monument and also provide job site security and the vehicle escort to the city line. So the pros that we saw from this proposal, this is an organization that has experience operating historic battlefields, museums, and sites. The monument would be available for the public to visit. There's relatively limited cost to the city, and once the transfer is executed, the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation will assume full ownership and responsibility for it. The negatives from the evaluation committee's point of view was its location. It's 250 miles away. That location has very little connection to the local Confederate troops from Princess Anne County. Very few of them were involved in the Valley campaigns. So for those local descendants of Princess Anne who view the monument as a memorial for their ancestors, that will be taken away from them. And their proposal, even with the responses that we requested after the first submittal, were lacking in some detail, particularly how it would be displayed and where it would be displayed, and they did not submit the requested conservation plan. So currently, the monument remains in storage. It's been there since July 25th of 2020. Before removing it and placing it in storage, we hired a professional firm to do an existing conditions report that helped guide us in the removal process and also provided us with recommendations for maintaining it in storage. So our third option would be to continue to care for it, maintain it in storage. If we want to do that, we should assess the appropriateness of that storage location and the situation it currently is in. But that is a third option for us at this time. So in conclusion, the evaluation committee did not reach a consensus on recommending one proposal over the other. So we can maintain it in storage while we evaluate our options. All requirements from the state for removal have been met, and we're looking for city council direction, particularly on whether you think the statue monument should remain here in the city of Virginia Beach or whether relocation outside of the city is acceptable.
Okay, thank you. Questions and discussion. Any ideas? Ms. Henley? Okay. Rosemary, then Ms. Henley.
I can understand why the staff is in a conundrum over this. I know a lot of people would be unhappy to see it go all the way across the state, but yet the group here seems to be asking for a whole lot of support that I'm not sure that the citizens would all like for us to do that much, especially to take care of it in perpetuity when we're giving it to them, and I don't think we should be taking care of something in perpetuity that we will no longer own. It's kind of like when we were taking care of the Thurgood House. We didn't own it, but we were taking care of it, and that's when we acquired it, because then when we took care of it, we already owned it. So, and unless the local group could come back and give us a different offer, I think maybe we just leave it in storage for now.
Mr. Mayor, before you go to Ms. Henley, just directly to that, just to clarify a little bit what Mark was saying, really that's the kind of guidance that we're looking for today, because if council really wants us to keep it local, then we can go back and engage the local organization that responded to the RFP to see if we can get them to make their offer more advantageous to the city. So we're looking for that clarity to figure out how far do you want us to negotiate with the local party should council determine that they wanted to desire it to stay local before we take it outside of the area.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Henley?
I believe that's probably what we need to do, is to talk with the local group again, because it was my understanding that when the Shenandoah group found that there was a local opportunity, that they just stood down, and I guess that's why you did not get anything more from them, that they had only put their bid in case nobody else did. So I don't think they really wanted to compete with the local group. And if there are issues that we want the local group to address, I believe that they are willing to negotiate.
Okay, Ms. Abbott.
I just have a question. Is there a length of time it can be in storage, or do we have like a deadline to move it out of storage? Okay.
We have no deadline at this time. As I said, if we want to maintain it in storage for a longer period of time, we should assess the storage location it's in and how it's being stored. And we may need to bring in someone with further experience relative to that kind of object, which is it's a stone object, and make sure that we're caring for it properly. During the existing condition report that was done, it was noted it does have some biological growth. Should we clean it? When we moved it, we took it apart in 3 pieces. So we've exposed areas that hadn't been exposed previously. So we'd want to assess, how they're reacting to now being exposed to the environment. So, but there is really no time frame. We just would want to make sure that we are caring for it properly in storage.
Mr. Moss.
Great.
I want to pick up on Mrs. Abbott's line of questioning. Clearly, there's a threshold of time, and that probably has to be professionally determined, Mr. City Manager. So at a minimum, I think we need to know someone to assess its condition and whether or not, if it stays in that condition, what the deterioration rate is. There's a critical path of either do something more or time will take its own toll and make the decision for us. So I think we need to know that, because that will influence negotiations, whatever we have. But I would like to echo Councilwoman Wilson's remarks about it's very difficult to think we're going to have this long-term financial obligation. So I would like to, one, know what the threshold of time is when we have to move the storage. And that ought to be a red line for coming back to us on either where you're at, or we have to make some kind of commitment of resources, Mr. Mayor, to have it in climate control storage or however that happens. But deterioration happens quickly on those things when they just sit and they're not even getting the normal air exposure and now dampness and moisture, and next thing you know, you get a big bill for restoration, and we'd like to avoid that as well. I thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, how about at this point, a couple of things that have been, suggested, find out about, the storage implications and timelines and things of that nature, and then get back to the other group. And if we can do this on an expedited basis, I think that would be good.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Dehaney.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, at this time, the CVB staff will now brief the City Council on our spring and summer marketing campaign.
Welcome.
Are we good? Hello, Mayor and members of City Council. First, I'd like to start off the presentation by thanking you for your vision and assistance in helping CVB and our hospitality community navigate the COVID-19 pandemic and focus our evolution from response to recovery. The $2 million that was added to the TAP fund in May was an important investment and had a significant impact, which we'll go over in the next couple of slides. We'll go to the next one. This slide is a reminder slide that we showed you in October. We're incredibly proud of our We Are Open campaign, which was developed in partnership with our creative partner, I Am Other, and under the oversight of our Advertising Advisory Committee. The campaign returned dividends as the Virginia Beach DMA led occupancy over all top 25 DMA markets from March to September. Our research source, Smith Travel, pulls data in DMAs, so the Norfolk Virginia Beach MSA is listed together. Virginia Beach represents about 70%, and Norfolk represents about 30%. This slide represents a case study so that you can see how the additional investment turned into actual bookings. We utilized Adara research, which helped us analyze the campaign's performance. Adara actually pixelates each one of the ads so that we can track travelers from their initial contact with our ad all the way through to the booking. We pixelated about $1.7 million worth of advertising, and in return, we had about 1.2 hotel searches and a little under 20,000 hotel bookings. The data that you see on the screen only represents about 39% of our hotel inventory because that's what Adara has access to in the number of booking sites that they utilize. The bottom line is that we really appreciate your aggressive support in our advertising and marketing program because it really makes a difference. But now it's time to move on, and CVB is laser focused on economic recovery. We're closely watching data trends and best practices. With the distribution of vaccines and the pent-up demand, we're starting to see a renewed sense of optimism. The data that you see on this screen was provided by Destinations Analysts, which is a private third-party trusted company in the travel and tourism field that does key consumer perception, attitudes, and studies to help hospitality industries make decisions. Some of the more encouraging data that came out of their studies, more than 70% of American travelers did travel dreaming in the month of March. A growing percentage of American travelers say they'll be taking at least one trip over the next 3 months, and that's almost 60% of the people that were surveyed. More than 84% already have tentative trips planned sometime in the year 2021. And beach destinations, of course, as well as national parks and other outdoor areas, remain at the top of mind. So far, our Visitor Information Center in the month of March, just in the month of March alone, has mailed out more than 1,000 vacation guides. So the bottom line is that travel potential continues to grow, and we're ready to have visitors select Virginia Beach. With that said, I'm going to turn the presentation now over to Lauren Townsend, our interim Vice President of Marketing, to discuss our exciting warm weather campaign.
Welcome.
Thank you all so much, Mr. Mayor and council members. Thank you so much, Nancy, for kicking things off and for having us here. It's great to see everyone. It's really hard to believe that little over a year ago, we were standing before you to present what was at the time intended to be our spring and summer campaign, welcoming visitors. We are wide open with a very wonderful emotional pull and call to action, and really, highlighting our community as the warm, welcoming, inclusive destination that we know it to be. Unfortunately, the world had other plans for us, and shortly thereafter, the COVID-19 pandemic set in. So we were really fortunate, as Nancy mentioned, to have the right strategic partners, the right team in place. Your support made all the difference, and for us to really quickly pivot and for us to be able to re-articulate that message of openness. Oh, looks like it may have gone straight to the end. Sorry about that. Sorry, y'all. Looks like we went all the way to the end of the presentation. Thank you. But yeah, it's really been quite a journey these past 12 months, pivoting from what was, the initial message of we're open to articulating it in a way that really told the story of our beaches being open and reopening our wonderful destination to visitors all up and down the East Coast and out to the Midwest. So we were really fortunate that, again, we had the right product with the right message, the right partnerships and support at the right time. So this year, we feel very optimistic as we head into another spring and summer season. We do this year have the benefit of knowing what worked. This time last year, unfortunately, the world didn't have a playbook for how to adequately market and promote tourism in the midst of a global pandemic. But we did see that we had the right ingredients, and we were able to get some really good wins. And we're hopeful that this year can be an even bigger win for our local business community, our tourism and hospitality community, and the city of Virginia Beach and its residents. So as we look ahead to our recovery efforts, we really see that these 4 tenets are what we believe are going to be some really strong strategic tactics for us to really move forward and continue on with our success. And that includes maintaining our investment with our media buy and the way that we are allocating those dollars, refining our targeting, engaging our industry partners, tourism and hospitality community, and extending and evolving our message that we have seen has been very resonant with travelers and with visitors. Slide. So when we talk about maintaining our investment, we're really fortunate that, last year we did see some great successes. And again, we are very cautiously optimistic as we head into this season. But fortunately, we have been able to maintain our spend, our year-over-year campaign media spend of $4 million within the domestic leisure space. And this is to run from early March through end of June. So the campaign rolled out on March 2nd and will continue on until the very end of this fiscal year 21, which will then roll straight into fiscal year 22, which at that point will be a transition into our late summer and fall campaign as we're promoting travel in those later summer months and early fall months. In addition, we are making sure that that media investment is really well spent and strategically sound. So we're making sure to heavy up in the digital and social space where we're able to track and optimize in real time, but also making sure that while we are focusing on that, surgical, laser-focused precision with digital, that we are also making sure we're getting as many eyeballs on our creative as possible, and people are thinking of Virginia Beach. So we are layering in some traditional television and select print as well, which we feel like is a strategic media mix. Thank you. And as we look ahead to refining our targeting, we know historically, and even having seen some of the target markets that have shown up in Virginia Beach, even in the midst of a pandemic. So we are continuing to prioritize those top performing high return on investment markets with a particular emphasis on those drive markets. We see that folks are still more comfortable getting in their car and driving to Virginia Beach. So in addition to the geographic targeting, we are layering in an even finer layer of targeting, making sure that we're looking at lifestyle interests, behavioral data, so that we're really honing in on these personas that we've developed, which we'll get into in just a moment. We've seen through our previous campaign efforts that lifestyle interest targeting is very successful. We do have really great travel product that aligns with some of those key lifestyle interests that travelers and consumers would be willing to get in the car and travel out of town to go visit. So this is still key to our effort, and it will still be very important since we're able to align those lifestyle interests with the product that we do have here in Virginia Beach. But in addition to that lifestyle interest targeting, we want to make sure that we're having an even keener focus on the human behind these decisions that are being made in terms of the vacation and travel plans that they're making. So we developed these two types, or two personas targeting those family traveler units so that we can really understand that key decision maker within the household. As we look towards that targeting, again, we're refining that targeting and layering in this added layer of persona-based targeting. And so we worked very closely with our research vendors and our industry partners as well to really make sure that we are making any decisions that are as data-driven and research-based and grounded in that data to really round out the way that we're approaching our campaign strategy. But in addition, making sure that we're hearing from our partners and layering in their observations and anecdotal insights. So here we've developed these two key personas, one being the Samantha household, which as you can see on the slide, it's a younger family, younger children, slightly lower household income, and they're looking for vacations that can provide really great value, and they are a bit more budget conscious when they're looking to plan their vacation. We also developed the traveler persona for Alexandra, which is a little bit more of the upper scale, higher end traveler, higher household income, slightly older family, and they're not as concerned about budget considerations, and they have more discretionary spending when they do make those travel decisions. And this is a lot of text, I realize, so we won't get into all those details, but we wanted to make sure that you all could see the thinking and the thought and the care that goes into developing these personas. We really wanted to make sure when we were developing this view of Samantha. We were getting a true 360-degree look at who she is, what goes into her travel planning and decision-making process, what type of content is she, consuming, where is she hoping to travel, what types of experiences are they looking for she and her family. And the same thing applies when we were developing the persona for Alexandra, which, as you can see here, again, we're making sure that we're keeping a close eye towards what are those experiences, what are those keywords that they're using when they're going to research travel, vacations, and destinations, so that we can really make sure that when they are in their travel planning and booking cycle, that we are speaking to them where they are in their psychological and also where they are in the travel planning stage as well. Another really important component of our strategy is making sure that we are working very closely with our industry partners. So we did work with them over the course of about 9 months or so, back late summer of 2020, heading into the rollout of this campaign to make sure that we were working in lockstep to develop our strategy and trying to gain alignment, especially when we're going to develop these personas, which will guide so much of our targeting and so much of our campaign strategy. So as you can see here, we started, again, way back late summer, and we've been in lockstep with them through the rollout of the campaign. And this just gives you a quick overview of what some of those work outputs and those deliverables coming from some of these efforts. This in particular shows a few examples of the work output coming from our collaborative workshop that we held with them, with our AAC members, which was a really wonderful experience. All of those learnings and insights, all of the data and research that really grounded this exercise, in addition to those observations with our partners, gave us a very clear idea of how we can communicate with these two key personas. Again, the Samanthas and the Alexandras, they have their own realities and they're looking for slightly different experiences. But at the end of the day, we see that sweet spot right down the middle where we know Virginia Beach can deliver across the board. We are a very friendly, family-oriented destination, allowing people to get a nice change of pace. Through our communications, we're giving those insider tips and knowledge. And at the end of the day, these families, just like the rest of the world, we've all been cooped up, so we're all looking for a little time to ourselves. But especially, the mothers and key decision makers in these households, I think they could use a little time for themselves as well. So using all of those learnings, we are then taking all of that to extend and evolve the messaging. As we had talked about, and as Nancy had mentioned, our We're Open campaign performed very well for us, but we're layering in this added layer of families and celebrating families this year, which will allow us to really extend and enhance that message moving forward. It's guiding all the campaign content that we're developing, our website content, our PR and media outreach efforts, how we pitch stories to the media, our social media strategy, so on and so forth. And we'd like to take a quick moment just to share with you some of the creative examples that we've developed as part of the paid media campaign. As you can see here, and I do want to note that this is not an exhaustive list or selection of our creative, but this just gives you a good sense of some of our digital display banners that run online. These, I'm sure you all have encountered them any number of times that you've gone online. We have them in a number of sizes, both for desktop and mobile, since we know that the consumer is engaging with content on their mobile phone extensively and their tablet devices as well. So this just gives you a quick overview of how we're selling the Virginia Beach product, that outdoors product, our beaches, the openness so that folks can social distance, but also coastal distance is a term that we've been hearing a lot, and also some of the other lifestyle interest and travel product that we have here, like history, arts, entertainment, dining, craft beer, so on and so forth. Here's just a quick example of some of our paid content marketing. As you can see, we are promoting the Virginia Beach product across a number of these trusted publishers in their native environment, and we call these native advertising units. So you can see here in the top left corner, this is just a quick example of how we are telling the Virginia Beach foodie and culinary scene and how it would be displayed on a publisher such as USA Today. Similarly, we have ads running on the Cincinnati Enquirer and the Baltimore Sun, just to name a few. And this gives a quick overview of some of our ad units that are running in the paid social space as well across Instagram, Facebook. We also have some of our ads running. We leverage image-based ad units, scrolling carousel units, video units. We see really great engagement on our social platforms, especially in the paid space where we're able to extend that reach and get the engagement with our creative and our message. Another digital tactic that we're very excited about and which has been a really great performer for us, especially in recent years, is email marketing. And I know that that may seem counterintuitive since I think we all get so many emails, but we have seen really wonderful performance, and increasingly so. We do have a really robust programmatic email marketing campaign with our digital media vendor, Orange 142. But in addition, this is the slide here provides just a couple of quick visuals for a few other email marketing programs. One is a new pilot program that we're testing with Wherever Family, which is a travel-focused publisher, but in particular that has a focus on families. So we felt like there was really great alignment with this publisher. We're excited to see how this program runs this year, and we will test and optimize. Similarly, to the left of the slide, you can see just a quick visual of the first email send that went out as part of our program that we are working with the Virginia Beach Hotel Association that we are supporting. It's just a really great way for us to tell the Virginia Beach story, partner with a lot of our tourism and hospitality partners, and again, to see in the digital space that really great tracking and that story that we can tell of actual arrivals. And then in addition, kind of going back to one of our key strategic tenets for this campaign is really activating and partnering with our local industry. So this just gives you a quick overview of the digital campaign toolkit that is available on visitvirginiabeach.com. Our tourism and hospitality partners have been made aware of this and will continue to promote this toolkit. We want to make sure that we are providing as much resource and assistance to our local business community and our tourism and hospitality community. On the toolkit, they're able to access any number of assets and resources to help in their efforts, including the We're Open logo, getting access to some of the window signage, and also what we're very excited about is being able to provide these free of cost family resources so that when visitors are arriving in Virginia Beach and they've seen our message of being open and that this year we're really celebrating families, it's across the board. They're seeing it at restaurants, they're seeing it at hotels, and any number of businesses. So as you can see here, we do provide some free resources, including a coloring book, a learning guide, all sorts of activities like scavenger hunts, and so forth. And I think we're unable to share our video. We may have some technical difficulty, but we will make sure to provide those links to you all so you can take a look at our different 15s and 30-second video spots as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions or comments? Hey, thank you, and I'll tell you what, the program you put together last year during times of challenge and adversity, we went a long way to rescue a bad situation. It was about this time last year that we were looking at some dark times ahead. But all things considered, I understand that for 18 weeks we were #1 in the nation about pulling it together. So once again, we're going to look forward with optimism about what's going to be coming in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Mayor, the next presentation will be provided by Finance Director Letitia Shelton. She's going to give you an update on our monthly financials current as of the end of February.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
Mayor Dyer, Vice Mayor Wood, and City Council members. I'm Letitia Shelton, Finance Director, and I'm here to present the 8-month General Fund financial update. Next slide. Here's the general fund status as of February 28th, 2021. Year-to-date revenues are $586.5 million, or 49.6% of the budget, up by $3.1 million, or 0.5% of the prior year, over the prior year. Year-to-date expenditures include encumbrances of $872.6 million, or 66.7% of the budget, $33.5 million, or 4% increase over the prior year. This is due to hazards and appreciation pay, time and difference related to encumbrances, and payments to United Way. Next slide. This table provides a breakdown and comparison of the general fund local revenues. Real estate revenues are $304.7 million, an increase of $13.7 million, or 4.7% from the prior year. Personal property taxes are $20.8 million, an increase of approximately $100,000 from the prior year. And just a reminder that the personal property tax bills will be mailed in April and due back on June 5th. Other local taxes include sales, hotel, mill, utility, and telecommunications. Through February 28th, year-to-date revenues are $138.5 million, $4.3 million less than the prior year. Charges for services are $23.9 million, a decrease of $1.3 million from the prior year. Use of money and property includes interest revenues and rental income from the convention center. Year-to-date revenues are $22.5 million less than the prior year. Fines, fees, and license are approximately $600 less than the prior year. Next slide. Here are 9 types of other local taxes. Sales tax year-to-date revenues of $46.7 million are ahead of our fiscal year 20 collections by $4.2 million, or 9.9%. Revenues represents taxes collected through December. Business license year-to-date revenues of $17.3 million are $0.2 million less than the prior year. Hotel taxes of $5.2 million are $0.9 million less than the prior year, of which $0.5 million is recorded in March 2021 due to a timing difference. Meal taxes of $22.9 million are $7.5 million less than the prior year as well, of which $3.6 million is recorded in March 2021 due to a timing difference. Other than that, revenues for the remaining types are comparable to the prior year. Next slide. This slide is included as a reminder that there is a 1 to 2 month lag in timing of the collections of other taxes. Next slide. Here's a monthly comparison of the major trustee taxes. As you're reviewing this monthly data, remember there is a 1 month lag in the collections of hotel, meals, and admission taxes, and there's a 2 month lag in the collection of sale taxes. As previously noted, $500,000 of the hotel taxes and $3.6 million of the meal taxes that were received in February are not recorded until March of 2021 due to a timing difference. Admission taxes are down $5.6 million, or 69% compared to the prior year. General sales revenue total collections are up by $2.7 million, or 4% over the prior year. Next slide. This chart is a comparison of the hotel tax revenues received by the city. The orange curve represents the 2021 collections. The blue curve represents the 2019-20 collections. And the black dotted curve represents the 2019-20 collections adjusted for inflation. Again, the decline in 2021 revenues compared to 2020 is due to the $500,000 of hotel tax revenues received in February, but not recorded until March due to a timing difference. Next slide, please. This chart reflects the comparison of meal tax revenues received by the city. Again, the decline in the 2021 revenues compared to FY20 is due to $3.6 million of meal tax received in February, but is not recorded until March. Next slide, please. Through February 28th, 2021, general fund expenditures, including encumbrances, are $872.6 million, or 66.7% of the budget, compared to $839.1 million, 66.3% for 2020. The $33.5 million increase in expenditures are identified in the footnotes at the bottom of the slide. Next slide, please. She beat me to it. This guide chart shows most expenditures tend to be incurred evenly through the year, as shown by the red straight line trend at the top of the curve. FY21 year-to-date expenditures are 66.7 of the budget is denoted by the straight green line. Unlike expenditures, revenues are not collected evenly throughout the year, as shown by the two orange slopes in the bottom of the curve. FY21 year-to-date revenues, again, are 49.6% of the budget, as denoted by the curvy blue line. FY21 revenues and expenditures are tracking comparably to the prior years. Next slide, please. So this is a new addition to our package. The city received a total of $78.6 million CARES Act funding as of February 28th, 2021. The $78.6 million does not include other CARES Act grants, the Municipal Utility Relief Program, the 2020 elections grants, the Emergency Shelter Grant, and the Community Block Grant. As previously noted, the CARES Act fund is not a part of the general fund. However, it is important for the council to be able to know the balance as to where we are year to date. A more detailed synopsis of the CARES Act funding will be provided in a future date. Next slide, please. As of February, general fund revenues are ahead of the prior year. General fund expenditures are tracking comparably to prior years as a percentage of the budget. We expect that FY 2021 actual revenues will exceed budget and FY 21 expenditures will be below budget. The first half of the real estate levy was due December 5th. The FY 21 collection rate of 98.2% is in line with the prior year collection rate of 98.4%. Next slide, please. Go back one. Okay. As a final slide, this is just a reminder of important dates to come. With that, that concludes our financial presentation. Are there any questions from council?
Any questions?
I have two.
Yes, Mr. Moss.
If I may. On slides 7 and 8, if it's not too difficult, I know we have those lines for the prior year as they were with the delay in collections. So either one, it'd be nice to show the line that goes with the narrative you just suggested, but it would be better if we were comparing what that line looked like when that was 2 months lagging or 1 month lagging. So when you look at it, you're not having to do the math. It's nice if it's apple to apple lines, if that's not overly difficult.
Okay.
That's just that comment. But on slide 11, I just wanted to bring, I might be the only one that had this issue with this slide, but I want to bring to your attention when it says still to be transferred $18 million of CARES Act funding money, that does not mean that there's a balance for us to use of 18 million, which I thought that's what it might have meant when it said still to be transferred, meaning it's sitting in the reserve account waiting for us to allocate it. In reality, only $8.9 million of that $18 million is truly available to be allocated to new obligations, and you might want to make a note of that. That doesn't come across when you see that, but upon my inquiry with the city manager, I learned that's to be true. So the other money is encumbered but not yet reconciled, and that kind of, so in case anyone else thought we had $18 million to the good, we only have like 8.9. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You got it. Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Okay, at this point, it was recommended by council that we not only have discussions, but also opportunities to bring forward any initiatives that we may have. So at this point, we'll open the floor up to any council member for discussions or any things that they may be willing to bring forward. Anybody?
Well,
yes, John.
And maybe, hopefully Mrs. Henley will comment on this, but I'm interested in the non-material policy issues that we're going to be developing and coming forward, whether it's about building code request changes or what we do in that regards to allow us, as we have new construction, are we going to say that things have to be built, higher? If we're trying to build them, I know we went one block higher, or something, but should we be building them even higher? Are there places in our city, if we rebuild, that we know that are floodplain areas, that we want them to need to be, like Norfolk, 6 feet higher? I think these are some non-material policy changes as we see redevelopment. I noticed as I was driving down Edinburgh, for example, Mr. Mayor, I noticed that there's a place where they had leveled a home as you're approaching Little Neck Road. And you may recall, this is one of those neighborhoods where the street and the lots are the same. They're level with that kind of span drainage. Well, as we see more of that, is that what do we really want people building back at the same paving over, building the concrete foundation, and we're repeating that? Or do we want to have a look at the policies, allow us, as we do see that type of redevelopment, that we have some new standards, or we have to go to the state? That would be interesting. But I think that's going to be happening, I think, more and more, Mr. Mayor, across our community with housing prices as we look at the locations, that kind of stuff. And we need to be rebuilding stuff back that are more resilient than the structures that were there. I don't say that's, but I think that has to be part of that non-material solution that we talk about when we're looking at things of public expense. So I hope that's the one things that we're going to be doing. And I know this year we did not quite get to where we wanted to, Mr. Mayor, with regards to a formal resolution on budget guidance. We fell short on the timeline. I would like to hope that we could pull that 5-year forecast maybe a little bit to the left. And therefore we'd be able to maybe get to that and actually set a deadline for having a budget resolution that we adopted that would actually set guidance in front and not put us where I think we're going to be again this year with more contention than is necessary. That's my opinion. And lastly, I think we need to be setting a timeline for ourselves, or thinking about the process by which we want to do and set up a redistricting committee. This is the time to be thinking about that, not necessarily making the final choice, but we ought to be having some discussions. Or are we going to set up a group independently and have them screen through people who want to consider, and they give us nominations? But how are we going to do that to try to mimic maybe what the state did? Since we endorsed the General Assembly having an independent group, I'd assume that we would want to be following our own example and endorsing such a practice for ourselves. But whether we have districts or not, we still got to have redistricting. And I think we need to be thinking about how we're going to fashion an independent committee and how that's going to be selected, and not necessarily waiting until September when the Census Bureau drops the decision on us. So I think that's something which I think other people have an opinion on, but not to take all the time. Those are 3 things that I would like to say, and if there's some other time available, I might bring some other items to the floor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Certainly. Ms. Abbott.
Thank you. Well, one of the things that I wanted to talk about, it goes back to, I think it might have been the last voting meeting, but it could have been a voting meeting before. We had a agenda item where one of the biggest parts of concerns was the tree density on the property. And one thing I'm hearing a lot from the community is a increase in their desire to really understand the benefit of our trees and forests in the city. And, of course, the internet hears everything we say. So one of the things that was brought to my attention was that New York City did a street tree map, and I know we have something similar, but one thing that they did is they calculated the value of every tree and then its economic impact. And I think that is kind of going off what John was already talking about, could be an important part to our discussions, especially when it pertains to new development and some of our meetings, and being able to really assign a number to the density of trees that is on properties, how it's going to impact as those trees come down, if they're going to be replaced. But I also think it could also be used as a tool for us to encourage new development to be replacing trees. Of course, a new tree never has the same benefit as an older tree, but I do think that we need to be mindful and start really taking an active doing the most that we can do to be active in making sure that if trees have to come down, they're replaced, and encouraging that new development to understand what that dollar amount value really is. So I don't have a suggestion at the moment, but it's something I'm interested in. Maybe staff can, like I said, I know we have something similar. I don't think we've actually cataloged every single tree in the city and assigned that dollar amount like New York City has done. They calculate, I'm happy to share this link with anyone, but they literally cataloged 685,000 trees and assigned a dollar amount to its value in terms of stormwater. So I think it'd be an interesting initiative. They did it with all volunteers. So just a thought. That's really all I have today.
Oh, thank you, Jess. And I think it's important. I remember a couple years ago, I was at a function, and they were giving away a lot of young trees and everything. And I think part of the education is to let people know that trees, the roots suck up water, and they're aesthetic, and they help get rid of carbon monoxide and a whole bunch of other tangible benefits. So I think if these type of things, and I thank Mrs. Henley for her initiative with the trees, because if we can get an active thing down at the southern part of the city, it may take a while to develop, but we're doing it now, so it would benefit further generations. Mrs. Henley?
Well, I was going to talk about a couple of other things, but I'll get to those and address the trees first. I think you probably received today a forwarded copy of Dr. McLaughlin's Phase 1 report of our tree study that we've done. I guess we've talked about everything else the past year and we've forgotten what we have done. But we are very much ahead of the curve. 2 years ago, I guess then, in partnership with the Nature Conservancy and some other organizations, funded a Phase 1 study that's been done. The Phase 1 is complete, has been for almost a year, but we never got to get a real presentation because of the pandemic. Looking at the value of forest in flooding, in relation particularly to the evapotranspiration, known as ET, and you should have a copy of that, a copy of an article that was just published in the Landscaping magazine nationally, describing the work that was done. We are light years ahead of many other places in doing things like this, and I think this scientific data is going to be the basis not only for our own work, but that will be able to be adapted for others. But clearly, an evapotranspiration is the process by which we know that trees take up far more water than they can use themselves, and the abundance is then transferred through the canopy into the air, and this is ET, evapotranspiration. And the value of forest, and Virginia Beach has many, and we do have them pretty much cataloged, with the work that Dr. McLaughlin has done, clearly shows that of the types of forests that we have, the vegetated wetlands forest consume, as you will see in the report, far more, much greater percentage of water than others and so forth. And so we have this data. We've got the science from that, and now and they were to have, by this time, hopefully completed the second phase, but with the pandemic and not being able to get their graduate students on it, Virginia Tech will be completing the second phase of this report later, which is going to zero in more on specific areas that we should be particularly conserving or reforesting to get the greatest benefit for flooding from the forests that we have. Of course, this is different from street trees and so forth, but Virginia Beach has done a lot, and I think it's important that we recognize what we have done and use it. And that's something that I think we'll be able to do as we go forward, particularly as we use the natural mitigation phase of our sea level rise plan to know where the trees do the most good, what types of areas they do the most good, what kinds they do the most good, and where we should be continuing to preserve and perhaps reforest. So we have done a lot, and I'll be glad to, more than glad to shower you with all of this information so we don't lose what we have going forward. And of course, last year, we adopted a resolution, and I think it was supported by all of council in just the carrying it forward, that for any trees that the city has to take down as a part of our projects, such as the NEMO 2 project that's underway now, we will replace those trees. And we did do a replacement project last October over in the Asheville Park area. I think we planted something like 800 trees one day. And so we are doing that, and we are replacing trees. It's our policy now, we adopted it, that if the city, in its projects, take down any trees, we replace them. Now we'll know what kind and where in a better fashion. But that's just in addition to what I did want to say. And this is something I've been wanting to tell you more about, but thank you for this opportunity, and I'll try not to take much time. But I've been very much concerned about the CIP project in the CIP for the southern watersheds. It's called the Southern Canal Lead Ditch Culvert Project. And we had a special meeting of the Ag Advisory Commission last night to look at those projects, because I've been concerned that we have maybe not gone in the direction that we should, and we need to make sure we reprioritize that. I think it's a great CIP project. I think it's funded at a good level to do what we need to do in the southern part of the city, but I think we need to make sure we're doing what it's supposed to do, and that is to identifying the lead ditches and the canals and the culverts that need to be maintained or brought back to what they need to do to get the water off. But as we go forward in making sure we're doing that project the way it needs to be done, it's pretty obvious that as we are talking about stormwater citywide, that maintenance is going to be an extremely important part of our stormwater project. And I hope that we'll be ready to address this with the budget. 8 years ago, in our off-road ditch program citywide, we hired a second crew to do the off-road ditches, and they established zones, 8 in the northern part of the city and 8 in the southern part of the city. So now we have 2 crews doing off-road ditches. They do one zone in the northern part of the city each year and one zone in the southern part. This is the 8th year of that cycle, and as we look back over how successful that has been, I think something that we need to look at really in the budget is that project, how well it has achieved the goal of an 8-year cycle for the off-road ditches, and make sure we're going to be in a position to maintain that going forward. So those are the off-road ditches citywide, but then we also have the roadside ditches. And in the southern part of the city, they're a continuous problem, I think in the north as well. I think we're also going to need to give some special attention to the maintenance of our roadside ditches. So we are having this group of different types of drainage systems, particularly in the southern part of the city, where we've got the lead ditches and the canals, we've got the off-road ditches, we've got the roadside ditches, and then we have the farm ditches, which are maintained by the farmers, and they have to marry with the others. And it's very important that we do all of this. And then we have the individual house lots. And this is something I know we've been talking about for years doing. I know Rosemary has been particularly interested in how we can incentivize individual homeowners to do things. And the Green Ribbon Committee, as a proposal that I'll be bringing forward in the budget, that I hope we can do what is being done by Charlottesville and Albemarle County in conjunction with our Virginia Dare Soil and Water Conservation District to supplement an active program that they've got, which will allow homeowners to be able to do things on their own lots to help with the drainage. And so all of this together is what I think we need to be looking at. I think we're in a good track, but I think with this budget, we not only should be talking about these long-term stormwater things, but I think we're really going to have to look very hard at the maintenance and see how it's all being brought together. Today on your agenda, we are accepting a grant from the Fish and Wildlife federal grant program to begin or to design a marsh restoration program in Back Bay. This is the other component of our flooding, which is the wind tide. This will be a design project that will be completed next year, and I hope that we're going to be looking very hard for how we're going to make sure when we get this design complete next year, we've got money to construct it right away, because this is where we're going to really be able to address the wind tide situation. It's going to be very important that we cultivate our partners, and I just wanted to let you know that Congresswoman Lorraine Luria is going to be establishing an Albemarle Roundtable. This sounds familiar to what we did 2 years ago with the forums that we started with the Albemarle. We've made some good partnerships with North Carolina, but if we're going to do things that we need to do and be able to get those grants that we need to get federally, we're going to have to look to our partners to the south in North Carolina, because we're all a part of this. And I just wanted to let you know that I'm going to be participating in that round table with her, and I really appreciate her putting this together and giving us these opportunities. So I just wanted a chance to let you know what I've been up to. I think we've got an awful lot going on, and I look forward to really making some headway, particularly in the southern part of the city.
Thank you for that, Ms. Henley, and I'm glad that, that we're doing this to allow every council member the opportunity, to bring forward and let people know what's going on in their districts, and also come up with ideas. Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Moss.
My nickel back. I don't know, many people probably haven't taken time to read the 954-page committee report on the American Rescue Plan or the act itself. But at some point here and I've only skimmed the committee report, but I am going to get through it. But it would be at some point here in the not too distant future, I did ask our legislative liaison to reach out to our lobbyists that we pay in Washington to give us some kind of a synopsis. It is not easy to deduce, where the macro level of funding and all the different categories. It's amazing how that might flow our way. And I know the city manager has given us some ballpark things to look at, and that may not be knowable until after we've adopted our budget, but I think we should be mindful as that comes available, and that provides us opportunity to further reduce what other tax rates we adopt in our budget on May the 12th. We should look for every opportunity, not necessarily to spend all those grants, but use those grants in lieu of money we've appropriated and allow us to enable tax reductions to the benefit of our citizens. So the sooner we can get a handle on what all that is, because that's real money, and we got to be looking for how that can help provide. I don't think they gave everybody $1,400 so they could give it to us. They're supposed to be able to use it on themselves, so I hope we can keep track of that. But that is a piece of legislation that's got lots of grants, lots of direct allocations, lots of subspecialties, and we really need to be educated on what that is and what the opportunities are. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, any council comments at all? Go for it, Mr. Moss.
One's on the agenda item. We were briefed last week on the JTL thing, Juvenile Detention Center, relative to their needs. And I won't go into all the details here because of how that was briefed. But I did have a number of questions that I asked, and I just want to make sure you know that we are currently in compliance. Remember, that's one of the questions I asked. Were we in non-compliance with the state standard? We are in compliance with the state standard, and we're not in any immediate danger of non-compliance. So while there is a sense of technological obsolescence issues to be addressed, I do think there is time to address the issues that Councilman Wood talked about, is whether or not we should be having a common system between the sheriffs and that, or really should we have a distinct system? So I would hope when this comes under the time for a vote that the manager will not be committing the actual expenditure to the solution at hand until he is certain that having a common system between our two places that have custodial requirements cannot somehow be the same. But the sense of urgency was slightly overstated when we were briefed, and we're not in the on the brink precipice of a liability or failure. And I think we ought to take advantage of that time, Mr. Mayor, to make sure that if there is room for commonality, that we pursue that versus standalone systems. One other comment that I had, I asked a question, you may recall, about not Building 1, but the current City Hall building that we live in, as to the need for an atrium. And I'm sure you all saw this memo. But I am certain that if you never started out with the thought of not having an atrium, that now having to get rid of it would cost money. But my point was, we should have thought about that at the front end and not having to be asked here about it. But I think anyone that thinks atriums in public buildings serve as a symbol of open government, as a justification, really, it's insulting. I mean, atriums are not, and that is not even a building that the general public would go to. But to say we're justifying an atrium because we need a symbol of open government, we don't need symbols of open government. We need practices of open government. We need actions that represent it. And I really would hope that in the future, that these are words, these are expressions, but they're not justifications. And I think the problem is here we're not thinking about, because I'm certain that there'll be someone sitting here in the future who will say, you know, we need additional 3,000 square feet for somebody to sit somewhere, because I've yet to see our FTEs decline in a net way, and they had space. But someone said, oh, we need an atrium for the public utilities and public works so that there'll be a symbol of open government. Mr. Mayor, that's just not reality. That's not a justification. I understand we can't go back in time for cost reasons, but we need to be thinking better on the front end. This is not our money. We don't earn this money. We confiscate people's money. And if you were doing this with your own private money in a private building, I'll never forget what the CEO of Vanguard once said, the founder. I never invest in companies that have fountains at their headquarters. They don't value the stockholders' money. I think atriums fall in that category. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ms. Wilson.
What John was bringing up, and also Mr. Wood, about this juvenile detention center, I agree with Mr. Moss that before we appropriate this money, that maybe we should, because it's underused, utilized. There's only half the young people in it that should be. I mean, when we built it to be fully, if there is a way we can centralize or regionalize and either utilize the facility better than it is now, if we could take a look at all of that before we expend this money. So maybe we can defer it.
Well, I'd be happy appropriating it because I have full faith in that the city manager, before he actually gives someone the ability to sign a check, is going to make sure he's checked off the concerns that we've met, and he'll come back and tell us. So I don't have an issue knowing it's going to be on hold, and that the city manager, knowing what our concerns are, won't hit the obligation button until he's satisfied us. I think that's just me. I mean, I can go either way, but I'm not opposed to going with the agenda as is, Mr. Mayor. With those conditions, and I see the city manager nodding his head, I trust him.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Ms. Wilson. Anybody else? Ms. Henley.
Take all of the time from everybody if somebody else wants to comment on anything. But looking ahead at our 3-month tentative schedule, particularly during the budget, and I know Mr. Moss doesn't want a lot of budget presentation, but frankly, I do. And he said last week that he wouldn't object if we had special briefings for the people who wanted more and less for others. I would be very happy to come in an hour earlier and get a more in-depth briefing. I see that we're not meeting next week. Last year we did meet on March 31st. I believe we heard about stormwater. Typically during February and March we would have been getting briefings on the CIP items, and we have not done that. So we're left with 1 month to get all in depth about the CIP items as well as the budget. And I really don't see nearly anything close to the amount of time we have been historically spending on the budget. And I for one would be happy to come in for additional in-depth reporting, and Mr. Moss can do his thing because he does it all the time, and he knows better than somebody like me who doesn't do it for an occupation, living for a living. But I certainly want to make sure I'm not missing anything. So if anybody else would like to do that, I certainly would. If not, I'll just have to ask for individual questions on my own.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. Moss.
What I was after was not us having meetings, because I think having our meetings such that they were for questions. I liked last year where this, and I watched some of those videos, I suspect some of you did too, where the staff, because we didn't meet, they gave the briefings. People could watch them at 2 o'clock in the morning, which sometimes I did, or other times. And then when you come, you have the briefing material, but you've read it, you might have watched it. But then we can spend our time on asking the questions, because my objection has always been to death by PowerPoint, not I enjoy all the questions that my peers ask. I enjoy getting the answers back from the staff, but I'd like the time that we spend to be time of learning the things we don't know and the questions that are on each of our minds versus, how else to say it, death by PowerPoint, because I can read the slides. And, but I'm not opposed. If that's what the majority wants to do, then the council members can come or not at their own pleasure, their workshops. But it's the questions time that I would like to have, because I think that's where we find maybe the consensus that precludes, Mr. Mayor, the reconciliation from being a true on the margin versus afternoon, a middle of the night, and phone calls trying to find where we can find the center point. And that's what I was after, because I think that's where that happens, is in the dialogue, not in the presentations. But I don't have any objection to us going back to death by PowerPoint. You know, it's
Okay, anyone else? Okay, Mr. Tower.
I was just trying to find on the schedule, speaking of the 3-month schedule, when we thought we were going to deal with short-term rentals. I've just as I've said that, I've found it, I think, April 20th, right? Is that the right date? Okay, I just need.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Mr. Wood.
And I know we need to get short-term rentals done, but where is that in terms of our budget schedule? Because if that's going to be an extraordinarily busy time with the budget, that might be better to defer short-term rentals until after the budget. That would be my recommendation.
There's a public hearing for the budget on April 21st, which is a Wednesday, and then an additional public hearing on the following Tuesday, which is 27th, which council has indicated that it would be a virtual public hearing. So that helps you. The public hearing is April, the first one.
No, I'm sorry, the public hearing for short-term rentals.
I think it's on the 20th of April. The 21st is the first public hearing for the budget, which will be virtual. The second public hearing is the 27th.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, Mr.
I'm just going to make note that the one on the 27th is the one required by state law. That is the one for the effective tax rate that has to be no sooner than 10 days prior to the vote on the budget. That's what the April 27th, that's the real estate tax notice that will go out that will state the effective lowered rate is 9.887, and whatever amount the city manager puts in there to be the amount that's actually takes to adopt the budget that he recommends. That public hearing is for that purpose.
Okay, and yeah, Mr. Raffs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Looking at the agenda tonight, I'm just trying to understand in ordinance and resolutions. I know we're going to go over the agenda. I'm just trying to understand the resolution for short-term rental zoning permit fee, a possible increase in that, and how does that coincide or fits into our operating budget that we're going to be discussing short-term rentals.
Okay, Dana.
Good afternoon, Council. The item in tonight's agenda is directly a result of a policy the Council put in place 2 years ago, which told staff before they went and put a notice in the newspaper to increase certain fees or to increase taxes, that they come to the City Council, get a resolution, basically the Council's buy-in to the placement of those ads in the newspaper, in essence. So we know there is consensus on the council for us to proceed with that notice before you find out about the notice in the newspaper.
So there will be, obviously it's going in the newspaper, there'll be opportunity for public engagement.
Yeah, so that newspaper ad will provide a date for people to come and provide comment on that proposed fee, so the short-term fee that is on the agenda tonight. So,
And that would, thank you.
so it's basically an opportunity before the notice is placed, but the notice tells of a public hearing where the public gets to come and speak to it.
And that will be for our consideration, and obviously we'll hear from in the operating budget of 2021. Is that correct?
So yes, there will be an item that coincides with the budget. This one has to go Planning Commission first. So there'll actually be an opportunity to go to Planning Commission to speak to it, but then there will also be an opportunity to address this council before the council can adopt it.
And before we adopt into our, if council decides to adopt in our 2021 operating budget, correct?
So there'll be an adoption of the actual fee in sense of putting it into the city code, and then the budget itself includes revenues from that fee to support some positions that actually will go around doing the inspections.
Okay, and then we'll have a discussion on short-term rentals after the budget is passed. Is that correct? I'm just trying to get a timeline of.
So I believe the April 20 item is the overlay concept that.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get this ironed out, but, I guess one of the things we're gonna have to discuss is about when to have the short-term rental discussion in lieu of all the stuff we have to do, with the budget. Okay, Ms. Abbott.
I got a lot of feedback about this item and some confusion. So we're just voting to put the ad in the paper is effectively what tonight's vote is.
That's correct. So the manager and
That's
the clerk, by city council policy, cannot put that ad in the paper until you, in essence, endorse it.
That makes me feel better because sounds like you heard from people too. So the only other thing I heard about this was that word zoning. I'm sure I'm not the only one who got that email about whether that's not relevant to what the purpose of this resolution is.
So zoning, I guess, is the construct that puts them into the type of fee that falls into the policy. So if maybe that helps. So you've got taxes, clear cut, any one of those has to come to you guys for endorsement before the ad goes in the paper. And then there's two types of fees. One is one that relates to public utilities, and one is one that relates to zoning. Okay. Those are specifically carved out in the state code for a special type of notice before you can enact any fee increases or new fees for those types of things. And that statute requires the statement of what the amount of fee is. If it's an increase, the percent of increase from the previous, a specific reference to the statute authorizing the fee, and then direction where any person in the public can go inspect any records related to the fee. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Mr. Moss.
Also, I think I did some research on it as well, Jessica. Also, you may recall in Barry Knight's legislation when he established the entitlement to short-term rentals in Sandbridge, he did not exempt them from normal zoning and other types of issues. And this word zoning allows us to overcome any kind of obstacles that state statute, which gave them short-term rentals by entitlement, but did not exempt them from zoning, other type of enforcement, kind of gives that overlay for that. That's what I understand. There is a legal basis for doing so.
Mrs. Henley.
Just looking at the 3-month tentative schedule, particularly the budget, I don't see that we're meeting with the schools at all. Did we decide not to do that? We usually hear them for their budget presentation. Are we not doing that?
Okay, what's discussion from council on that? Once again, I think when it came forward, we were still under, some restrictions on meeting. Mr. Duhaney, any guidance on this?
To the chair, to Councilwoman Henley, are you talking about this school superintendent and his staff giving their presentation on their budget? Or are you talking about the school board?
They usually, when we're having that 6 weeks or so of budget briefings for the council, usually one of those during that time, we have the school superintendent and any of the board come over and tell us about their budget and anything they want us to hear, just as a part of our preparation for adopting the budget.
Yeah, Councilwoman Henley, the intention is for the superintendent to come during that, sometime during that process, to come and present before council.
Right.
Yeah, I think that'll be essential going forward.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
I only ask that when it's scheduled sufficiently after you have presented the total budget such that all the questions that we might have in advance of such a briefing, the staff will have answered so that we can engage as a superintendent from at least a level playing field of the budget. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else on council comments? Okay, Mr. Wood, we're ready for the review.
Okay, under ordinances and resolutions, I understand, Mr. Moss, you want to pull item 9B, J9B. Okay, there's no other speakers on any of these items. Does anybody want to pull anything under ordinances and resolutions other than J9B?
And I will be asking for a deferral, just so you know what I'll be asking.
So okay, so just J9B. Under planning, item K1, which is Gray Point Cove LLC, Sharon L. Gray, for a variance of lot width, 3108 Little Haven Drive, Little Haven and Glen Haven District. I'm okay with that one. That's on for consent. Number 2, Kenneth Stewart Proud, Mark and Crystal Proud, for a change in nonconformity, enlargement of existing dwelling, 228 Cavalier Drive, Beach District. You okay with that? You're voting no. Item 3 is going to be heard. There's speakers on that. Item 4, First Chinese Baptist Church, modification of conditions, Ray religious use at 228 Pritchard Road, Beach District. It's on consent. Everybody okay with that? Item 5, Maximo P. Aquinde Jr. and Edeniris O. Aquinde for conditional use permit, family daycare, 980 Avery Way, in the Centerville District. Ms. Wooten.
I'm okay with that.
Item 6, Dion Johnson Sr. and Jessica Diaz Johnson for conditional use permit, Ray Family Daycare at 5150 Rugby Road in the Centerville District.
I'm okay with that as well. Thank you.
It's daycare day in Centerville. Item 7 is Toya Smith SST Holdings LLC, conditional use permit, Ray Assembly use at 701A South Military Highway, Kempsville.
I'm good.
Items 8 and 9 have speakers, so that's it, Mr. Mayor.
All righty, moving forward, the chair will entertain a motion to recess into a closed session pursuant to the exemptions from open meetings allowed by Section 2.23711A Code of Virginia as amended for the following purposes. Publicly held property. Discussions or considerations of acquisitions of real property for public purpose or of the disposition of publicly held property where the discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the body pursuant to 2.23711A3. Here's the list. Princess Anne District, Princess Anne District, Beach District, Princess Anne District, Princess Anne District, Princess Anne District, Princess Anne District. It's about Mrs. Henley tonight. Legal matters, consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members or consultants pertaining to actual or probable litigation where such consultants or briefings in an open meeting would adversely affect the negotiation or litigating posture of the body pursuant to Section 2.23711A7. First is Boust et al. Versus City of Virginia Beach and Adams Outdoor versus City of Virginia Beach. Cybersecurity matters, discussions or plans to protect public safety as it relates to terrorist activity or specific cybersecurity threats or vulnerabilities and briefings by staff members, legal counsel, or law enforcement or emergency service officials concerning actions taken to respond to such matters or a elevated threat to public safety, discussions of information excluded from this chapter pursuant to subsection 3 or 4 of section 2.23705.2, where discussion in an open meeting would jeopardize the safety of any person or the security of any facility, building, structure, information technology system, or software program or discussion of reports or plans related to the security of any governmental facility, building, or structure, or the safety of persons using such facility, buildings, or structure pursuant to Section 2.2 37A19. Prospective business or industry. Discussion concerning a prospective business or industry or the expansion of existing businesses or industry where no previous announcement has been made of business or industry's interest in locating or expanding in facilities in the community pursuant to Section 2.2 3711A5. Princess Anne District, Princess Anne District, Princess Anne District, Princess Anne District. Personnel matters, discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of any public body pursuant to Section 2.2 3711A1. Council appointments, council boards, commissions, committees, authorities, agendas, and appointees. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
No, you got to go to Princess Anne to find out what's going on, so. Okay, do we have a second on that?
Second.
Okay, can we have the roll, please?
Councilmember Abbott?
Aye.
Councilmember Bellucci's absent. Councilmember Henley? Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Councilmember Moss?
Aye.
Councilmember Rouse? Councilmember Tower? Councilmember Wilson?
Aye.
Councilmember Wooten?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Wood?
Aye.
Mayor Dyer? 10-0.
Okay, at this point, we're going to recess into executive, but I suggest we take a break first, okay? We are now in recess. Aaron.